Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the April 24th, 2023 meeting of the East Penn School District Board of School Directors. May everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. First item is a report from the EHS Student Government Association from Ms. Wachowski and Ms. Hess.
Good evening. We have a very exciting time coming up for our music department as spring concert season is beginning. Tomorrow night in the Emmaus Auditorium at 7, the Emmaus Orchestra will be holding their spring concert. The Emmaus Band Spring Concert will be held May 2nd at 7 in the auditorium. And the choir department spring concert will be held May 11th at 7, also in the auditorium. This Friday is also the choir department's Broadway night fundraiser, which will also be held in the auditorium at 7. Another upcoming event is the Emmaus Art Show, and that will be held May 25th at 7 p.m. Congratulations to Julia McDonald and Sophie Isom, who were selected out of thousands of high school students to perform with the NAFME All East Symphonic Band in Rochester, New York. Our Technology Student Association team placed second out of 63 teams across the state, qualifying them for the national competition. The FBLA state competition recently took place in Hershey. Emmaus student Cece Coleman qualified for nationals by placing second in the state in risk management, and Jackson Holden placed 10th in Intro to Business Procedures. Now on to Maddie.
So just to start with some sports, good evening, by the way. So for track and field, our girls reached their 7th victory of the season on April 21st against Liberty. Just a little bit more about the track and field. Their senior night is at home against Nazareth today. It actually already happened at 3:30 p.m. From what I've heard, they've done quite well. Boys volleyball, Cooper Henslinger just received his 1,000th assist at the Friday's game against Deerhoff. Congratulations to Cooper. Our boys lacrosse team is currently 8-3 overall, but 6-0 in conference. Girls lacrosse is 10-3 overall. Tonight is their cross-out cancer game event after it got postponed due to weather. Girls JV played at 5 p.m. and boys varsity started at 6:30 p.m. They should be wrapping up pretty shortly. Girls softball is 11-4. Their next game is tomorrow at home against Northampton. And boys baseball is 10-5. Tomorrow is mentor night and Saturday is senior night. So we're at the fun time of all the sports right now. So just some other things that are happening in our school. College announcement day for athletes is this coming Wednesday, the 26th at 1 p.m. in the auditorium. And a big congratulations to the students who were inducted to the World Honor Society last Thursday. If you were not aware, the regulations or the requirements, to become a part of the National Honor Society changed this year for the first time. So not only did students have to have a certain grade in level 3 or higher, but they also had to participate in some type of community service or some type of extra effort within their language, whether that was tutoring, going to club meetings, something along those lines. So big congratulations to the students that received that honor. And finally, issue 5 and the final issue of this year's current staff with the Stinger has come out. We are very excited. It's going to be distributed over the next 2 days, so I highly recommend reaching out for a copy. We are incredibly proud of the work that all of our staff have put in this year, and even more excited to see what our new staff is going to do next year for the actual final issue of the year. It's been a lot of late nights at school and more Wawa runs than we all care to admit, but it is done, and we are very proud of it. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? All right. Well, thank you much for the report. As usual, you're welcome to stay, but if you have other things you'd like to do this evening, you're free to go.
Thank you. Unfortunately, it's AP exam season, so we're in a little bit of crunch time right now.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda are requests to address the board. I have 5, but before we get into that, I'd like to read the following statement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with public comment, speakers should feel free to express their opinion, comment, or question, and understand that this is not an interactive engagement with the board or with the administration. Please direct your comments to the chair. Be respectful, not engage in profane rhetoric, and be mindful that others, including students, may be listening. I would request that you consider that protocol when making your comments. For the members of the audience, please also be respectful and refrain from speaking during the public comment period. With that, I will now announce each speaker and their topic. When you step up to the podium, again, state your name, and you will have 3 minutes within which to speak, and I will give you a 10-second warning when your 3 minutes are about to expire. First up tonight is Ms. Barbara Tanteros on the topic of transgender.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Tanteris, and I've been observing or attending these board meetings for 5 years. And I'd like to preface what I have to say tonight, that I'm coming in love and compassion for all the students in the East Penn School District. And I will be voicing my objection to the indoctrination by this board in our schools of the false doctrine of transgenderism. I'm not transphobic, but rather a student of the truth. The false idea that a child can change his or her gender is a lie. For a child to do so is not a once-and-done thing. It takes years of medical attention, hormones, and lots of money to this drastic step that can never be reversed. I know for a fact because I have an extended family member who spent thousands to trans and ended up committing suicide. So I do have a vested interest in this objection. There are no long-term studies to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of the drugs, hormones, and puberty blockers that are used on these vulnerable children. The best long-term evidence we have is among adults that show that medical interventions fail to reduce suicides. The suicides that follow are often a result of the unhappiness they encounter after the fact. So often I hear from this board about protecting the children, that their safety is being of utmost importance. Why then this blatant lie that will damage them for life? The lie that you can change your gender is also a frontal attack on the image of God. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. Genesis 1:27. This indoctrination will further obliterate the moral fabric of our nation. Even if you have no fear of God, please do the right thing and stop this assault on our precious children. Stop the transgender lie. Stop the insanity. Our children deserve better. Oh, and by the way, I do want to say something about the Fiddler on the Roof play that was performed. The cast, the crew, the staff, all truly deserve a standing ovation. It was excellent. And so what's wrong with tradition? Tradition, what they sang about, it's no longer here anymore. And how refreshing, how truly refreshing, seeing Tevia's personal conversational relationship with God. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Jen Reedy on Act 71, Exploitation Awareness.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Dr. Levinson, and members of the board and staff. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Act 71, and you probably think of it as the act that requires you to educate staff about suicide prevention. But there is a part of the act that doesn't get a lot of attention that I think it should, because it's about protecting children. It's about protecting something that impacts at least 20% of children. In Section 1527 of Act 71, it says, each school entity may develop an age-appropriate child exploitation awareness program and incorporate such program into the school entity's existing curriculum for students in kindergarten through grade 8. And it goes on to talk about that the Department of Education has a sample curriculum. Now, most people look at that and they're like, what in the heck is exploitation awareness? What that means is that you as a school are allowed to teach the children about child sexual abuse. This affects 1 in 4 girls, and 1 in 6 boys. I was a victim of child sexual abuse when I was 5 years old. And like most victims, my perpetrator was a family member. So children who are victims of child sexual abuse usually are not being educated by their families on how to prevent this, who to report it to, how to get help. Children who are victims of child sex abuse are more likely to display problematic behaviors and have difficulty in school, and often don't even complete school. So this is very important to the educational process. So I encourage you to please examine this issue and see if it is something that we should be doing in our school. And I would offer my assistance in being on any committee that would be put together to try and look into curricula to handle this, because it is something that has been proven to be helpful to children in getting out of these situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Mary Ellen Jackson to talk about Parents for Equity in East Penn. Update.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It's really nice to have such a large audience. And I'm here to talk about PEEPS, which is the Parents for Equity in East Penn Schools. And just to give an update, and I am going to repeat what the group is for because I understand that people are listening on Zoom as well. And we did have people attend our latest meeting, which was on Sunday. And we are interested in community building. We're interested in actually working across the entire district. So we had people from parents from the high school. We had parents from actually every school, almost, except for some of the elementary schools. So we really did get the word out there. We had an event on Sunday. It was coffee and conversations, and it was really nice. And the next time we're having our event is we're having another community building event on May 11th at Rising River Brewery at 7 o'clock. And the reason we're having these different kinds of things is because we did do a poll on our Facebook page, and this is what the people in the community said they wanted to hear. So thank you all again, and we hope anybody in this room, anybody on Zoom, anybody that would like to join us, we can see you then. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Jason Hulko on the topic of what is being done to address the shocking level of violence taking place at the high school.
Thank you, Dr. Levinson. Thank you, board, for hearing us out. I come today with great concern because apparently it just came to my attention that there are numerous accounts on Instagram. They're constantly being put up and taken down, one of which had 15 posts on it, 12 of which were violence occurring in the high school, rather severe violence, some of which leading to bloodshed, all occurring since winter break. As a parent, I had been completely unaware of this until it was brought to my attention by a friend of the family. Why are we not being told about this? What is being done about it? According to my son, apparently a couple of bathrooms were shut down today, and that was the only difference he really noticed. You need to keep the parents better informed if there is an outbreak of violence going on in the school. I'm not naive. I understand this isn't just an Emmaus thing. It's happening everywhere. But we need to know what you guys are doing to keep our children safe while they are trying to get an education.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Jess Denke on Freedom to Read.
Good evening, Dr. Levinson and the board. Thank you for giving me a few moments. In honor of National Library Week, And in light of local recent book banning attempts, I thought I would return to a fundamental document of the American Library Association and share a few sections of the Freedom to Read statement. The freedom to read is essential to our democracy. It is continuously under attack. Private groups and public authorities in various parts of the country are working to remove or limit access to reading materials, to censor content in schools, to label controversial views, to distribute lists of objectionable books or authors, and to purge libraries. These actions apparently rise from a view that our national tradition of free expression is no longer valid, that censorship and suppression are needed to counter threats to safety or national security, as well as to avoid the subversion of politics and the corruption of morals. We, librarians, as individuals devoted to reading and as responsible for disseminating ideas, wish to assert the public interest in the preservation of the freedom to read. Most attempts at suppression rest on a denial of the fundamental premise of democracy, that the ordinary individual, by exercising critical judgment, will select the good and reject the bad. We trust Americans to recognize propaganda and misinformation and to make their own decisions about what they read and believe. We do not believe they are prepared to sacrifice their heritage of a free press in order to be protected against what others think may be bad for them. We believe they still favor free enterprise in ideas and expression. These efforts at suppression are related to a larger pattern of pressures being brought against education, the press, art and films, broadcast media, and the internet. The problem is not only one of actual censorship. The shadow of fear cast by these pressures leads, we suspect, to an even larger voluntary curtailment of expression by those who seek to avoid controversy or unwelcome scrutiny by government officials. Such pressure towards conformity is perhaps natural in a time of accelerated change, and yet suppression is never more dangerous than in a time of social tension. Freedom has given the United States the elasticity to endure strain. Freedom keeps open the path of novel and creative solutions and enables change to come by choice. Every silencing of a heresy, every enforcement of an orthodoxy diminishes the toughness and resilience of our society and leaves it the less able to deal with controversy and difference. Publishers and librarians serve the educational process
10
by
seconds.
helping to make available knowledge and ideas required for the growth of mind and in the increase of learning. I wanted to commend East Penn librarians. They're doing a good job. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes our request to address the board. Thank you for all of you who participated. Our next item, I've been looking forward to this, is some student recognition for the LMMS team for What's So Cool About Manufacturing. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I'm actually going to start off by asking Mrs. Alice Bolris, who is our advisor for the What's So Cool About Manufacturing team from Lower Macungie Middle School, to actually come forward and help me to introduce her students who are here tonight. So Alice, if you wouldn't mind coming on up. And we have really, over the past several months, spoken about the What's So Cool About Manufacturing video contest, which is something in which participating middle schools are partnered with a local manufacturing company or partner to develop a video to help communicate the message about the powerful collaboration and the powerful career options in terms of manufacturing. And Lower Macungie Middle School, we partnered with B. Braun Medical, and our video, I should say the LMMS students, their video was selected as one of 4 videos from the Lehigh Valley contest to advance on to the annual statewide contest, which is scheduled for about a month from now in May, which is held at the Whitaker Center in Harrisburg. And so after several months, 11 different regional competitions, and over 140 middle school teams, Lower Macungie Middle School is representing our region at the statewide competition. And so I just invite Mrs. Bolris to introduce the students from the team who are here tonight. And I want to just take a moment, and we are going to have a chance to see their awesome video as well. I know that's what we're all excited to see again, but I just wanted to take a moment to really express our gratitude, first and foremost to Mrs. Bolris for her outstanding leadership with our team, really to congratulate all of our student videographers from Lower Macungie Middle School who did a phenomenal job, and several of us were there in the audience. And the most outstanding award is that award is the last award of the evening. And we all kept whispering to someone, we had to win. We had to get something because the video was really so awesome. So I sincerely express my appreciation to our students for how hard they have worked and how very proud we are. And I'm also so excited to see so many families here tonight because I can appreciate that to create a video as awesome as the one that we're going to see in a couple minutes, it was a lot of work. I'm sure it's like a lot of later nights after school. And so certainly we appreciate our parents' support for their students and what's so cool about manufacturing and for being here tonight as well.
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. Definitely a lot of lunches, right, kids, that we worked through, right? So you'd like me to call them
Yeah,
up?
that'd be great. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to start with our president of our club. That's Chase Miller. Come on up. Followed by another 8th grader, Robert Snyder. We had a third 8th grader that was not able to come tonight. Then we have Leo McCabe, 7th grader. You might recognize Leo. He is the host of the video. We have Tyler Iyengar, a contestant on the video. Harry Redman. Gabby Davila. And Avalon Riser. Thank you. Do you want to go ahead and? All right, yeah.
And I think we'd like to take an opportunity to have a little photo op, if you don't mind.
Yep.
That would not be cool.
Not so cool.
I'm blocked, I'm okay.
It's okay.
Everybody take a step towards Mrs. Taylor. Just gonna take a step towards that one, just so we can center you. Thank you, guys. Everybody smile.
So again, congratulations to our students, and we are really excited for next month and wishing you the very best at the state level competition. Thanks again, Mrs. Bolris, for coming out, as well as our families.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Actually, before you... Before you leave, I just wanted to speak on behalf of the board. Again, I think this is a wonderful competition that you all participated in. It touches on the technical, it touches on communication skills, it touches on being creative, and that was definitely very creative. And I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you, we're proud of you, and good luck at States. Thank you again for being here tonight. Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the March 27th, 2023 meeting. May I have...
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is the district update. Dr. Campbell.
Yes, thank you. This is a follow-up to the opening act, which was really our What's So Cool About Manufacturing team that we're very proud of. We're also proud of our Students of the Month from LCTI. This, for the month of February, so we're a month behind, but for the month of February, LCTI recognized several Emmaus High School students for their outstanding work, both in their academic classes as well as their labs and student leadership. So we're very proud of Isabella Lopez, Samuel Malitzum, Olivia Grafe, Benjamin Rauschman, and Jacob Walter. I'd also like to express our appreciation to the East Penn Education Foundation for hosting our 2023 Career Exploration Fair. We held that on March 28th. We had 50 local community partners who came out and spent the evening with our students, really talking about their career path and what opportunities were available to them. After not having the event for several years, we were thrilled to see almost 300 students and their families in attendance. And there was one lucky student who won the AirPods Max for participating in the Career Fair Digital Passports. I would also like to congratulate several Emmaus High School teams for outstanding accomplishments over the past several months. Just recently, the EHS academic team participated in the academic competition at the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit and came in second out of over 13 schools. A special thank you and appreciation to Mr. Bizignani, who is the student advisor, and we are really appreciative of his continued leadership and dedication to our high school academic team. We also would like to congratulate the high school winter sports teams, specifically recently the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference identified the scholar athletes from our winter season. Congratulations to Dylan Darville from who is a boys basketball player, Casey Bender, who is a member of the girls basketball team, Macy Butler, who is part of high school cheerleading, Griffin Lake from the rifle team, Ryan DeJohn from boys swim and dive team, Haley Reinhardt from the girls swim and dive team, and Marco Albanese who is a wrestler. So congratulations to our scholar athletes, again, who excel not only in their athletic performance, but also, again, academically, as well as leadership in the community. We're also very proud last month, or I should say just recently, actually this past week, the Eyre Jazz Band participated in the Middle School Jazz Festival, which was held at Emmaus High School, and they earned a rating of outstanding, as well as best overall trumpet section of all the participating ensembles. And our rhythm section from the Eyre Jazz Band was named the best of the competition. In addition, Krishna Namani was also named Eyre's best soloist. So again, great job to our student musicians from Eyre Middle School. The following day, on April 15th, our middle level technology and engineering department hosted its 4th annual Girls in STEM event. Students from Eyre and Lower Macungie Middle School had the opportunity to participate in a variety of hands-on STEM activities through the collaborative support of Spillman Farmer Architects, Dewey Engineering, our high school tech ed department, the high school Jasper department, Alvernia University, Emmaus Juxta Hub, and Lehigh Valley Dream Team. And so a huge thank you to all of our community partners, as well as our middle level tech ed department for organizing the event. That was really a great opportunity for girls to see the opportunities, the learning and future opportunities that are available to them in STEM fields. We're very proud of the fact that last week we were notified that East Penn was selected by the National Association of Music Merchants as being the best community for music education. The award recognizes everyone in our community, parents, community members, teachers, students, administrators, and our school board who make sure that music remains a critical part of our children's educational experience. We'd also like to extend a special appreciation to our Lower Macungie Middle School music teachers who helped to apply for this special award for our school district. And again, it's a really great accolade for our community as a whole for the way in which we all continue to support music as well as the arts. You might recall, it was around this time last year when I spoke at a meeting, one of our school board meetings, about the fact that we were very proud that Emmaus High School had formed a unified track and field team. The unified track and field program is offered at approximately 240 schools across Pennsylvania, and it's designed to lead more inclusive and accepting school environments. Emmaus High School was selected as the first school in Lehigh County to participate in the Unified Champion Schools program. The Unified Track and Field team at Emmaus High School includes students with and without intellectual disabilities who compete on the same interscholastic team as equal peers. Special Olympics Pennsylvania helps to provide support for this program through funding, technical guidance for staff, and resources for us at Emmaus High School. Our team has had their first full season this spring, and they're having a great season under the leadership of Coach Lynn Gitsky, who's a teacher at Emmaus High School. There was a recent article in Lehigh Valley News celebrating the success of our students from the Unified Track and Field team, and I encourage you to check that out. A special thank you also goes out to everyone who supported the PA Miss Amazing contest that was actually held at Emmaus High School just this past Saturday. This is the 3rd year that we in East Penn have hosted the event. You might recall, because we talked about this last year as well, Miss Amazing is a national movement led for and by girls and young women with disabilities. And the mission is to ensure equal opportunities for girls with disabilities to help build their self-esteem, break down stereotypes, and to open pathways for professional growth. This year, we didn't have any East Penn students who were contestants in the event, but we certainly had a strong showing of East Penn support for the contestants and the event overall. I want to extend a special appreciation to our facilities department who helped to facilitate the event at Emmaus High School. I'd also like to recognize one of our high school students, Ethan Berger, who helped with the entire lighting, and our high school football team, who actually served as escorts for the girls in their formal wear for the event for the evening. And finally, also recognize our high school technology department, who certainly did a great job in terms of pre-production as well as troubleshooting during the evening. There are a lot of exciting upcoming events for us in the community. Lehigh Career and Technical Institute is hosting Camp LCTI. We hope that you'll consider this opportunity for students. It's offered June 20th to the 23rd. Campers who sign up by April 30th will get a free camp t-shirt. The camp has been known to quote unquote sell out or the t-shirts go quickly. So families who are interested, please check out that opportunity on our district website. I also remind families that we are having our annual high school college fair this Thursday, the 27th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at our high school gyms. We have over 100 college, career, and technical and military representatives who will be present for the evening. It is a huge event, and so I encourage families to please join us. Also thinking ahead, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Our counseling department has designed a virtual suicide prevention series, and our first virtual event is scheduled for May 3rd, and so we encourage families to learn more about those events that are planned, and the information is available on our district website as well as building websites. These are a few final reminders that you're probably sick of hearing me say by this point, but kindergarten registration is now open. So if you have a student who will be 5 by September 1st, we'd love to have you join our East Penn team as soon as possible. Online registration is open and available, and we are also available if you need to call, and we'll talk you through the process or any support that you might need. Our foundation is also sponsoring its grad sign for both students who are graduating from Emmaus High School or seniors. We have also extended the graduate sign sale to our students who are graduating from 8th grade and moving on to the high school. So we encourage families to check out the grad sign sale that's sponsored by our foundation. And finally, both our facilities as well as our technology department are accepting applications for summer employment. If you're interested, please check out employment opportunities that are available on our district website. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any questions or comments on her report? Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, it's always wonderful to see the fruits of what our students are doing, and I think we get a presentation on what's so cool about manufacturing roughly every year, and they just get better and better. It blows my mind how slick and professional these presentations are. And I'm really proud that East Penn puts resources into this competition. There are decisions that are made, I'm sure, about where resources go. Happy that Mrs. Bolris is leading the effort. She's definitely one of our teaching superstars, wonderful at turning kids on and getting them excited about topics that are sometimes hard to get them excited about. And every meeting we hear about many teams that, like, you just went through such a long list. I didn't clock it, but I'm sure it was 5 or 10 minutes long, all the accomplishments of academic team, jazz band. In past meetings, it's been the kids who go to history day or math counts, on and on and on. And all of that happens because we have great invested advisors to help these kids, get them excited, keep them focused. And obviously, the kids are doing a great job too. So all of that, just kudos to everybody involved. I did want to follow up on 2 things that were said during public comment. One, the gentleman who asked about parental notification, and I thought he had a very good point. I do think parents deserve to know what's happening in their schools and what we're doing to protect their kids. So I would hope that the district would respond to that. And personally, I would like to hear more. The one speaker who asked about Act 71, I'm curious to know what we're already doing in terms of what she was saying that we were allowed to do. I'm just not aware of what our curriculum is in that area, and I'd like to know more.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bowman. Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Our next item is the spring 2023 math update. Dr. Campbell.
Yes, I'll give a brief introduction before I turn things over to members of our Office of Teaching and Learning. But you might recall earlier this fall, in November of 2022, I believe it was some of the same team members, Mr. Mahalik and Mrs. Thatcher, who provided our board and the community with an update of our district assessment data from the 21-22 school year. Specifically, we really took a deep dive and shared with the board an overview of our analysis of strengths, areas for growth, and then next steps in terms of how we were going to identify those areas that really are areas of need for us for future growth. And so this evening, looks like Mrs. Thatcher is going to kick it off, but she and Mr. Mahalik will be sharing a summary of the action steps that we have taken. When I say we, we're referring to district building level administrators, probably most importantly, our department chairs and members of the math department in terms of steps that we've taken to address those areas of growth specific to the content area of math at East Penn. So thank you both for coming back, and I'll turn it over to you, Jess.
All right, thank you and good evening. So as Dr. Campbell reminded us, on November 14th, we shared a high levels overview of our screening and state assessment data here at East Penn. And so the purpose of tonight's presentation is to review math action steps to date that were derived from the information shared at the November meeting. And so we're really looking forward to sharing these updates with you tonight. Our teachers and building teams at every level have been very invested and have taken a lot of pride in the work to date, and they're really excited to continue engaging in that work for the remainder of the school year, into the summer, into next school year and beyond. And it's a really important piece of laying the groundwork for the success of our students here at East Penn, and we recognize that and do want to commend them on their hard work that led to many of the things you'll see in the action steps tonight. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to get started with the district overview.
Thank you and good evening. We're going to break this down and look at it in different levels. And the first level I want to look at or take you through this is a district-wide standpoint. And so you've heard of systems benchmarking, the work that our district has done this year with that. And for me personally, one of the most important things that I learned is this top quote at the top, the research that supports just how important middle school mathematics is to building a really solid foundation for students to be successful in college courses. So that for us, that was the takeaway, that we really need to prioritize making sure that we're doing what's best for students and putting them in a seat to be successful in those middle school years. And I really don't want this to be confused with not pushing or challenging or having high expectations of our students, but we really want to make sure that we're putting them in the right seat when it comes to our math course sequencing. And so related to that, we have placement rubrics that we've spent a lot of time on this past year, trying to clean them up and improve them. So we have lots of research supported data points at our fingertips, which is great. We have, you've heard of iReady, we have AMath, we have so many more data points, including past standardized test scores, but really what do we do with that and how do we use that to help us make really informed decisions to put students in a position to be successful. So we've done a lot of our own internal statistic work to make sure that we're using data points responsibly, ethically, and in the right way to put students in the course sequencing that we feel is most appropriate. And so that's a really important thing. But related to that then is communicating that to the students and their families. So we realize that we also need to improve the way in which we communicate. So we created a district-wide mathematics site that is now available, and we're going to work with the different buildings to communicate that website in the very immediate future. And there's lots of different resources that we now have on our website, including greater transparency about these placement rubrics, and also helping them understand, like, what is AMath, what is iReady, and how can we use these data points not only for student learning but also for, again, our course sequencing. Another thing, and I will actually mention, or I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots in a second here of the website, but just one more thing from a district level. We have seen a huge increase in the number of walkthroughs at all levels this year in our mathematics classrooms. And so, again, the frequency has certainly increased, but also the teacher feedback that we're able to offer them, but just have more conversation about mathematics instruction. That's been a great win this year. So just a couple really simple screenshots of our website. We have more resources for students and families and community members, our teachers, everyone involved in our East Penn community when it comes to curricular resources. So for instance, we have more details about iReady, PA course standards. We have more information about our screeners and our diagnostic assessments. What information do we get from these assessments? Why do we do it? And that's also something that we hope that the parents will really and the families will really appreciate. We have detailed information about Ready Classroom Mathematics, the curricular resource, but also iReady, the course sequencing, and this is a really important one, and especially from my point of view, just because there's a lot of questions about the math course sequencing and where are we trying to get to. And sometimes I've found that some families might be in a race and they're not really sure where they're going. When they're making these decisions about math in 6th grade, they don't necessarily know what comes in 11th grade and 12th grade. So the website should hopefully really be able to help even teachers at the 5th grade level be able to have better conversations with students and families at that age. And then we have different considerations for math acceleration and again, just more information about all the different ways, the different avenues to get to their end goals. From the perspective of the high school only, so you probably remember the stage 1 proposal. It happened in October. So those were, if you remember, we broke it down into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, pretty much Algebra 1, 2, Geometry, and an AP Pre-Calc. We approved or proposed them in the fall. Those were approved. We've been working on creating standards-aligned common assessments, which would be the stage 2 of our curriculum process, which is going to be a great thing because now we know that our assessments moving forward are aligned to PA core standards. So that is a really important step in our curriculum process, and we're soon going to be approaching that point where we start phase 2 courses. So we're going to have a lot going on, and this is going to be a lot of work for the teachers at the secondary level because you can see here we're working on stage 2 of 1, of some courses that they're going to be teaching, and then we're also going to be writing another set. But that is exciting work for sure. We're also piloting various resources to close gaps. So if you're familiar with the concept of iReady, where a teacher can essentially have a tool at their fingertips that we might have 30 students in the class that have 30 different unique needs. That's a really nice thing to be able to leverage, to be able to give the students the support, the instruction that they need in their individual areas. And so we're looking at different resources, including iExcel, Get More Math, and Freckle at the high school level that can close those gaps and also provide some supplemental instructional materials. And then finally, we started having small group meetings with the teachers at the high school level. So the whole process of using AMath is new to them. We've done that at different levels in the past. So we had small group, when I say small group, like I would meet with 2 teachers, 3 teachers at most in the winter months to talk more about in detail, what is AMath, what kind of information are we getting from this, and also CBM math automaticity, how do we use this, and really just be able to have some good conversations. And the teachers provided some amazing ideas that really deserve a lot of recognition and consideration moving forward, things that we might want to implement at the high school, so hopefully we can support our students at the high school level a little bit better moving forward. And I'll turn it back over to Mrs. Thatcher.
Thank you. So on this slide here, you see an overview of the K-8 math action steps. And so this includes all 7 of our elementary buildings in both of our middle schools. As members of OTL have been meeting with leaders from other districts, those both local to us and from our demographically alike peer groups, to have collaborative discussions about the structure of different math programming throughout the different districts. So we talk about things such as how are instructional minutes used, how are interventions structured, how is enrichment structured, what resources are used for that, as well as main curricular resources. And again, the goal was really just collaboration to learn more about what's working for others, what's not working, and then reflect upon our own context. We've also engaged in some really important math curricular work related to remapping of our Ready Classroom mathematics lessons back to the PA core math standards, and then reviewing the pacing and resource alignment for the upcoming school year. And I'll share more about that on the following slides. This is also the first year where we've introduced a K-8 math tier protocol. So for the first time, we're using a formal MTSS process where we look at our screening data and we use that to identify our students who may be in need of additional support and intervention. And so once they're identified as needing somebody who qualifies as possibly needing that additional support, we've also implemented interventions for students who are in need of that support at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level. We've also started the work of reviewing additional interventions for consideration next year or in the years to come, in addition to what we're currently using. So that includes using components of Ready Classroom, tools for instruction, things like that, as well as the Bridges intervention currently. So we're looking at ways that we might continue to beef up our interventions. At all of our buildings, the building teams have been working on all year setting grade level and classroom level Tier 1 math goals. And so they set these goals and they're continually revisiting to analyze these goals. And these take place in small group meetings with teachers. So teachers are part of setting the goals, part of reviewing the data. Their voice is really important in this process as we go through the revisions and monitoring progress. And then finally, for the K-8 level, we've increased targeted professional development for all stakeholders in our district related to instruction, so leaders, faculty, and staff. A lot of this has been related to small group instruction and centers and stations, which allows for teachers to differentiate within the math block, as well as provide additional opportunities for students to practice other meaningful things like discourse and problem solving. We've also reviewed pacing. We've reviewed our students' performance on the 2022 PSSA, but down to the assessment anchor. So looking specifically at the buckets of questions where we're performing well and where we could use some additional work. And so our leaders this year also were invited to participate in a session with one-on-one or in small groups with a Ready Math consultant, where they were able to bring forward their questions and concerns related to their specific buildings and contexts in order to get some guidance with any of the needs that they saw emerging. So here on this slide are the 6-8 middle level action steps. So these apply to both of our two middle schools. So this first action step that you see came out of a question that Mr. Jankowski had brought up in November. You may recall the root cause analysis question. And so in the fall and into the early winter, our middle level math teachers did participate in the process of going through a root cause analysis. We were able to collect teacher and leader feedback. So they provided hypotheses that they felt were most linked to the problem that we were experiencing. And so they were then sorted into the buckets that you see on the screen. So curriculum, instruction, assessment, equity, and professional development. And so then going to a more granular level within those buckets, you'll see the lack of fluency practice, some challenges with accessibility. So if you're thinking like literacy levels and being able to access different resources, the use of time at the middle level was one that came up continually. So the 42-minute period being a challenge. The need for increased professional development surrounding effective co-teaching, the increasing class sizes being a challenge, and then some challenges with the sequencing and pacing of the Ready Math curricular resource specific to the parameters that we have at the middle level here at East Penn. And so that brings me to the next topic you see there in the math curricular work. And so some of the work that has come out of that root cause analysis include the review of alternative curricular resources. And so I did speak a little to that in the November meeting as well. And so that included teams of people from the middle level. We met with representatives from different resources. We reviewed samples. We compared the mapping of the different resources to the standards for PA core mathematics, and then we also compared it to our current resource Ready Classroom mathematics. And so the team eventually came to the conclusion that Ready Classroom continues to be the most appropriate resource for East Penn School District at the middle level at this time. And so really that review just reaffirmed the use of our current resource, although the root cause analysis did provide us some insight into some other things that we needed to focus on. So one of those things will be providing resources for math fact fluency practice for all of our K-8 buildings next year. And then a team of middle level teachers came together back in March to begin the work of realigning our our pacing and resources for Ready Classroom for the upcoming school year. And so we chose to do this for the upcoming school year because Ready Classroom will be updating the workbooks. So the current workbooks we have will be adjusted and updated based on districts' feedback to address some of the concerns that we're seeing and other districts are seeing who use the product. And so with the limited time that we have to work with educators pulling them out of classrooms, we decided to focus that time and attention into the work for next school year. And that work was also through the lens of, again, reviewing our students' performance by anchor standard on last year's PSSA. So that that work will also be, I'll talk a little more about that on the next slide for elementary, but they will be engaging in that work in May as well. So again, back to the middle level. This is the middle level math site is a little different than the website that Mike just shared with you for the public. This is an internal site for our middle level teachers that is new this year and organizes all of their resources into one place. So that's resources that will be helpful in supporting their own professional development with the use of mathematics resources that we have currently, as well as resources that they can use to support students and families as well. And so another really important piece, the last item, both of our middle schools have set aside time this year during the 9th period during the school day so that students can engage in their iReady minutes, so the iReady personalized instruction outside of the math period. So that was a really important way to gain back instructional time during the school day in the math period. On this slide is the K-5 elementary action steps. So a big one, the very first one, the standardization of math instructional minutes. So this year, for the first time, all 7 of our buildings have equitable instructional minutes in math as well as other core areas. And with that came some guidance on how teachers could break up those minutes to support the different needs that we're seeing emerging in math. And so here again, we see the focus on small group instruction, which allows teachers to differentiate to meet students' needs more appropriately. So this is happening in addition to the whole group instruction. It's not replacing it, it's just additional practice where teachers will be able to give more individualized attention to students' needs. You'll also see classroom visits here, and I want to again differentiate from the walkthroughs that Mike shared are happening K-12, but these classroom visits are specific to K-5. This is a partnership between OTL and a building principal where we go in with a specific focus or look for, and it's typically tied to what the building has set for their math goal in their school-wide plan. And so we visit a set number of classrooms, and this is not necessarily focused on the specific teacher, but this is where we're looking for trends to inform for the building leader, building level PD needs. And then from my lens, since I am visiting all 7 of the elementary buildings, I'm looking for trends that are emerging district-wide so that we can better focus our professional development needs for the district level. So again, the elementary buildings are also setting those building-wide math goals that I described on the K-8 slide. And those are incremental, they're happening with core teams, and it's something that they're continually returning to and analyzing and discussing, having a lot of dialogue around. They look at right down to the student. And then finally on this slide, you'll see the addition this year of 2 math intervention teachers, which were ESSER funded for this year. And so those teachers have been really instrumental in providing additional support during core as well as during win time. So they've been pulling students, pushing in to do interventions, and they were assigned to buildings and classrooms based on those that were demonstrating the greatest areas of need within our district. And so I would like to thank you for providing us the time this evening to share these updates with you.
Okay. All right, thank you to our presenters. Again, very good information, thorough, and it looks like a lot of thought was put into this and continuing to capitalize on what we're learning and what we can do to help students. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Jankowski.
Sure. Yeah, I also thank you for providing this update and all the clear time that you put into developing these action items. I mean, it looks like a lot of thought was put into this. Just a couple follow-up comments and questions. I think it's really important. I think it's great that you've developed the website for the middle, the high school, elementary. I think it's important that the communication aspect is there so that parents and guardians are aware of these resources being available and an expectation that they're utilized to help the students further develop. Based on all these steps that you're putting in place, this is kind of like a two-part question. When do you realistically expect to start seeing the results from these steps? Like, how long do you think it will take? And then kind of a part B to that, or a subpart of that, is do you have internal, like, interim milestone targets that you're hoping to see to actually see the impact of these steps and to make sure that they're having the desired results so that you're able to either pivot if you're not getting the results with additional steps or change in course, or to just continue doing, if it's having the desired results?
Loaded question. So I think the first one is I really hope that we see signs of progress every single year moving forward. Some of these action steps, like, we're not going to really see the outcomes for a couple of years. Some of them could be immediate. So if we're giving our students right now more time to work on iReady, like, that is something we would hope that we would see right now. So I think then this is where, and maybe you want to come in, I think the answer to some of these questions might be different elementary, middle, and high school, depending on what we're looking at. So, and all three are at very different places. So we do have a lot of data. And so really it's then on us to make sure that we're looking at the data and then responding accordingly. What that might look like, again, at elementary is different than middle, which is different at high school, given, I guess, like their comfort level and how far along they are in the MTSS process. So I think that's a really big component of it. So I know that's a very general, vague statement, but in that very first slide, we did throw this in there, like, for a lot of this work is for 23, 24 and beyond, because we really do feel like this is going to build a solid foundation for years to come.
Guess we'll start seeing tomorrow with the PSSAs.
And I'll just add to that, I think what Mike shared, that it's going to be incremental in a variety of different ways, but we do make pivots along the way as we see things aren't working. So for just one example, the K-8 math tier protocol, that was designed by a group of people last year who are involved in the math process, identifying that, such as instructional specialists. And we went through this school year with that protocol, realizing we need to tighten it up for next school year. So already we've made adjustments to that protocol so that it's going to hopefully be more effective. We've used updated norms tables and benchmarks from our screeners, and to just continue to refine the process. So it was great that we had it for the first time, and it really was a useful tool in helping us to identify students. But then as we go through the process, we find the kinks, and then we're able to ebb and flow with working through that.
Great.
Do you mind, in response to your one question about interim milestones, I think were the words that you used. And then, I mean, certainly I appreciate you mentioned the PSSA, that being a one-time standardized assessment. We have PVOS data. But do you mind just also reminding the board in terms of the benchmark assessments that we give actually to all students?
And so I would say, I'd say that every time we administer those, and we do that 3 times a year, so our first window is in the fall, our second window is in the winter, and our third window is in the spring. And like Mike mentioned, different levels are at different places, but I would expect that we should hopefully see some increases in growth this year based on the steps we've made, and hopefully continue to see that next year in addition to the PSSA and the Keystones. And so just a reminder for math, that's FastBridge A-Math, and then it's the iReady diagnostic from Ready Classroom is what we're using for K-8.
Great. And then just for high school, we have A-Math and automaticity.
Okay, good. Well, thanks again, and I do appreciate, the passion that you've shown to help remediate our math scores and make sure our students are prepared for the next level, whichever level they're currently in. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jankowski. Ms. Bowman.
You had mentioned a few times doing root cause analyses, and I'm just wondering if you can tell us, in doing those, where in the K through 12 continuum are we most, or where are our critical points? Like, where are we losing kids and why? Like, what areas in that journey are we most trying to shore up and fix right now?
So the root cause analysis was conducted at the middle level only, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so without having conducted one K-5 or 9-12, I don't want to necessarily speak to what was, we didn't run that outside of collecting from our data or, anecdotal feedback from teachers and leaders. We haven't done a formal root cause analysis at those levels, but at the middle level, some of the things that were emerging are by time we've got them at the middle level and they're already lost, you've already kind of lost them. And then it's a huge challenge to regain the time and the skills that were lost K-5. So it really did reaffirm the increase in math minutes, the guidance for the differentiation in the small group instruction, and a need emerging for our August days of increasing our professional development for things like differentiation. And so those were some of the things that emerged for the needs, and then also highlighting that we don't just want to be focusing on the intervention, but we have a need for enriching our students who are accelerating as well. So whether they qualify for acceleration based on the rubrics that Mike was discussing, or whether they're just excelling in certain areas, we want to make sure that they're able to go deeper into grade level standards, and that they have those opportunities, and that we're focusing on that in addition to only focusing on intervention. So that was another thing that emerged from this work and talking with people and reviewing our data.
It sounded like on the middle level, when you met with the educators, they mentioned something to the degree of we have too many kids and not enough time. And it sounds like you solved the time part by doing that 9th period catch up. But how do you solve the too many kids class size issue?
And I want to be very careful about the 9th period before I go further, but because the 9th period relieves some of the pressure on the schedule, but they are still faced with a crunch because the resource is really ideal for 45 to 60 minutes. And so we only have 42, and that doesn't include transition time and, all of the things. And so by the time the kids are in and settled and instruction's happening, it might be more like 40 minutes. And so one way, and I don't think I elaborated on this, in the math curricular work that's happening at the middle level, in that resource and pacing alignment where they're looking at what we're going to be using next year in terms of resources, they sat down in teams by content, math course 1, 2, and 3, and they looked at the number of school days we have, the number of periods, when the PSSAs are, and then we worked backwards. What is the sequencing that Ready Classroom recommends? Then our teachers bring an added layer of expertise from their professional experience, looking at the standards that we're responsible for ensuring that our students are comfortable with. And then they built this framework that essentially is intended to ensure that they're getting all of those things within our parameters, since it is less than the 45 minutes. And to speak to the class size issue, that's a really interesting question, and that's something that we continue to mull over in terms of how we can most effectively utilize the staff that we have, as well as when things come up, like we have new contracts, where can they be best utilized in terms of all of the competing needs that we have in the district.
Okay, thank you. I just, this is coming up at the same time we're looking at the budget, and I hear that we're having issues with class size, but nowhere in the budget are we talking about hiring math teachers. So that concerns me. That said, I guess my last question is just, a lot of the things you talked about were, and I have this issue when we talk about reading too, they're like highly diagnostic, highly black and white, highly give kids more time, put them on the computer, do this, but nothing that you mentioned was about getting kids excited about math. And I know we have some standout teachers. I'm going to name some because I think teachers always deserve recognition. But Mr. Spencer, Miss Bokansky, Mr. Geist at the high school, who have a gift at getting kids to love math. I'm even think, why don't we have the kids who did What's So Cool About Manufacturing doing videos about what's so cool about math? I mean, I just don't see in this whole presentation the excitement and helping kids to love this, doing it, which you need that to actually learn it.
Thank you for that feedback. And I do just want to share on the K-5 elementary slide the focus on the small group instruction. And so when we partner that with going back to the K-8 slide and looking at the increased targeted professional development, and again, this is just speaking to the K-5 level, but the centers and stations are one area where we're focusing on. There will still be the use of technology as appropriate, but really focusing on getting kids involved in doing things and using manipulatives. And we had a really great session during our March Professional Development Day that was just a buzz with collaboration and excitement from our teachers as they were able to get together in a grade level team and make resources that they were then able to turn around and use right away in those centers and stations for their kids, so that it wasn't all, diagnostic and technology focused, but giving kids a chance to be excited about using something and doing something with groups of peers. But I do hear what you're saying about the excitement, and that is great feedback. And Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I say this as a former classroom teacher that work about what am I going to teach and how is this going to be interesting to kids. That's all work that happens within stage 1 and stage 2. So whenever we mention that, like we're not only talking about the standards line, but like what is this type of stuff that that's going to get kids excited to do math or science or whatever subject. So it's certainly not ignored. It just doesn't come out and jump out, during a presentation, but that is certainly a factor in the stage 1 and stage 2. And we've also talked, I don't want to go rogue, but we've talked about like, could we do more of like a community style type thing for math to not only educate, but also to just kind of build up the interest. But I think you bring up a great point, something we can put on our math website moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Mr. Champagne.
Yes, thank you very much. It sounds to me that it's, and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but a similar kind of set of circumstances we face in reading. If you lose them by grade 3 in the reading world, you may have lost them for good. And it sounds like in math, if we lose them in that elementary period, we struggle to get them back at the middle level and then beyond. So as Ms. Bowman said, we're in the middle of budget season. And resources are always going to be in demand across the district, and everyone's going to want more. But where is the critical, let's say, weak point in the resources that we have provided to you in the elementary level to ensure that we don't lose those kids? Is it the number of teachers? Is it the number of interventionists? Is it the length of the day? Do we not have enough time in the day to teach what is necessary? Because if I look at the recent data, the scores, the 4th grade proficiency levels are much higher than the 5th, the 6th, the 7th. It drops like a stone into an endless pit of water. So what is it that we, as the board, as we look at the budget for the coming year, as we think about math, we think about reading, we talked about interventionists in the reading world, where do you see the gaps that are still there to help get us across this bridge?
Sure, and so this is a really layered question. I think we may recall in previous meetings, Dr. Murphy and Mrs. Whitman had shared research that supported that additional time with content really is something that makes a difference for students, especially when they're struggling. And so you had mentioned the interventionists, and so it's not necessarily about plugging additional adults into a classroom, although that is helpful for a variety of reasons. It allows for more differentiation to happen and more personalized instruction. But being able to provide students additional practice outside of their core is really important. In order to do that, we do need staff. So our interventionists have been pivotal in fulfilling that need over the last couple of years, so that they're able to facilitate WIN groups, so that they're able to go in. If a student has a need in both ELA and math, we only have maybe enough staff to support one of the needs, or we don't run 2 WIN groups, so they're not getting an ELA and a math. So that means we need to be creative about where we can offer that. So they might be getting that within their core math block, not within core instruction, but during that small group instruction, that might be where somebody else is pushing in. So the classroom teacher might be leading a group with one set of students, while an interventionist is leading a group with another set of students, so that everybody is getting what they need. And so that's been a really important consideration as we've gone into budget planning. Where can we get additional people to support a variety of different needs that we're seeing emerging?
Well, if you think about the number of interventionists we have currently in the elementary level, you said we added some more this year. Is it sufficient across the district, or is there still a deficiency in that area that you see would make a substantial difference in terms of where we see kids being, let's say, getting to that 6th grade kind of transition point?
Sure. And so if we look back to the K-5 slide and think of the addition of those 2 math intervention teachers. So they were interventionists who were specific to math, because most of our interventionists did double duty and typically did focus on ELA as the primary need. And so while it was wonderful to have them, only having 2 for 7 schools, we had to make the decision of where were we going to put them so that it was most effective. It wouldn't have been effective to have them travel to all 7 buildings, which meant that our students in all 7 buildings weren't getting the support of those teachers. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it is sufficient. It was definitely a gift to have them and very helpful to have them for the buildings that did have them, but those 2 math intervention teachers were still shared. So each of them were assigned to 2 buildings, which meant they did an AM and a PM every day so that they could have a consistent schedule, push into the same classrooms, work with the same groups of students so that they were able to continue to address the needs of students. But that also meant that for the other half of the day, they weren't available for those classes because they were at another school. And then there were still 3 of our elementary buildings that they were not assigned to.
Would it be fair to say that essentially at least 1 interventionist is needed per building?
I would think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Whitney.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a little more about the website. I was actually trying to find it and I couldn't. I don't know if it's not live yet, but regardless, you mentioned the website in the context of the placement process. And I guess I'm just wondering if you could help me understand a little more how it's supposed to function and how it's really going to benefit families, how you hope that it will be a good resource for families.
Yeah, great question. So if you look at the image on the bottom right, this just gives you an idea of, for the students that part of our when we talk about acceleration, there's a couple different key points. The first one really being the 5 to 6 transition. So we have some students that will go from 5th grade math in elementary school, they'll then go to math course 2 in 6th grade, then algebra 1 in 7th grade, algebra 2 in 8th grade. That's the traditional accelerated track. But a lot of times we hear that sometimes the students and the parents, the families don't fully understand what that all means. So like if I do get recommended for this, what does that mean in terms of the math course sequencing? For middle school, where does this basically put them to, kind of like where does this put them then as a senior in high school? And so sometimes what happens is that maybe they're on a path that might be a little bit too aggressive for what they're even trying to accomplish. And then going back to that research that supports the need for a really strong foundation in middle school. So we're hoping that by showing them the different pathways and different points of acceleration that we get it right. And so we use the data, but we also want to educate and inform the family members, the students, and all the teachers to make sure that we're doing what's right for each student individually.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Mr. Byrd.
Yes, first of all, thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. Maybe they're loaded, but we'll still give them to you. I guess one of the things I talked about, or you guys talked about, is the cleaner data that you use to develop this model. One of the things I'm concerned about is, did you look at our diverse students, how each student is different in their background that you get that comes, and how did you look at that when you looked at the cleaner data to develop this program you're developing?
Yes, so our process was really, it's very involved, and critical to it is to have clean data from previous years. So I hope this makes sense. One of the challenges that we can't ignore is that the pandemic really threw a wrench to everything. So we don't have necessarily like PVOS data or past standardized test data from 3 years ago from different cohorts, and that's a challenge because a lot of times those have really good correlations to eventual success. So if for instance, if we knew, just like, I'm just gonna make a general statement, if we knew that a student was most likely not going to be proficient in algebra someday, then we probably don't want to accelerate them too early. That doesn't make sense. Like, let's use the data to make sure that we're giving them the support that they need. So what we're looking at is a lot of different data points from previous years. And so to do this work, we don't just kind of go on a hunch. We really look at any available data point that we have and then actually put it into SPSS and like do the actual statistical work to see what are the different data points that have correlations to eventual success for all of our students. So we can break it down and look at subgroups of students. We can do all of that kind of work. So it's very extensive, but I really do feel like we're looking at historically really good data points now that we're kind of out of the pandemic and we have reliable data that's available for all students, and we can break it down and really just, we're not going on a hunch. We're really making data-informed decisions.
So basically, model data overall for all students.
Yep. But we can, like I said, we can break it down.
One other question, I know one of my colleagues talked about application and making math cool. And I guess that's one really problem that you probably struggle with as teachers and professionals. And I guess maybe you can elaborate, like what can you really do? What are your plan? What are the big plans for that? I think that's really a big driver for success.
Yep, so I can, from the secondary lens, I think when we do the phase 2 presentation, you're gonna see hopefully some courses and some units that are maybe a little bit different. And we're trying to give different students something that's interesting and relevant to them in mathematics. So that's something I think you'll see this fall, but also then when you take any existing course and you break it down. For instance, if you recall the applications of algebra course, it's kind of like a replacement of the traditional Algebra 2 concepts. What we're trying to do with that is to make it more application-based for those students. So we're trying to do exactly what you're both asking for, which is making it more interesting by really basing it off of things that kids are interested in. And instead of going with formulas all day long, what's the point? How can we use this in our lives? Because everyone knows as learners how important it is to be learning something, and we see the relevance and the importance of it in our lives.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Any further questions or comments?
I just wanted to provide an additional layer of information. In particular, several board members, but most recently Mr. Champagne had asked in terms of resources that are potentially allocated in the upcoming budget cycle to support some of the work in math. And again, it was some time ago, but you might recall when Mr. Saul had given the expenditure presentation a couple months ago in February. He did provide an overview that we have allocated approximately $115,000 of additional funds to continue to support math resources, including iReady, but then also recognizing that this work with the curriculum teams was happening and there were some additional resources that were going to be needed to support our students. A really simple example is you saw on multiple slides just this emphasis on fact fluency, and so looking at some resources to support our students there. So I just wanted to give you that additional layer of info.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Any additional questions or comments? So again, I thank my colleagues for asking several questions, some of which I had for myself. I did note that throughout this whole process, it does appear that most all teachers were integrated into the process to help develop this protocol, so I think that's very valuable. Could you give me some examples of teacher feedback you've received over the last year as you've just developed this, and how do they see things working? Has this been easy for them to do this additional work to make these changes?
Yeah, I can start with high school, just some examples of teacher feedback that's really specific to the work that we've done. So there's no way the curriculum gets written without teachers doing it. And so really relying on their expertise. And I think this has been a really valuable process for them to go through. Really making sure that everything that we're doing is standards aligned, which goes back to the overall efficiency of what we're doing, so that we make the best use of our time, and getting them together and making those decisions. But I also think like the teacher feedback related to the different resources that we're piloting hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen soon because we're piloting this year, so that'll be a really important conversation at the high school level. Those small group meetings that I mentioned before, I found them to be tremendously valuable, just because some teachers had ideas about, we've got a group of students that are struggling, what can we do? So they know the challenges more than anyone else. They know it better of, well, how much time do they have? Are there different ways that we can look at supporting those students outside of that class period? For instance, at the high school, could we be doing something else during Hornet homeroom? So different things like that, I think those conversations were really helpful. And I was really encouraged by them because this is the first time for the high school to really go through that, I guess you could say, the MTSS process when it comes to the math screening data that we have. So excited about their work, and they've been really, really helpful at the high school level.
All right, that's great to hear. And one thing that I'm curious about, did you have more to add?
I was just going to share that I know I shared a little bit about the middle level, how that feedback played in with the root cause analysis, but a lot of this feedback also came as a result of walkthroughs, being in department meetings, being a part of planning meetings, working with teachers to just be open to hearing their feedback. As somebody, we want to hear the celebrations, but we also want to hear the pitfalls. And so one thing that I am appreciative of from our professionals K-8 is just their willingness to be open with us and share their ideas, and their willingness to volunteer their thoughts. And a lot of the work that you saw up here today actually did come from many of these meetings that Mr. Mahalik described, or that I had described in the action steps. And so I think that teachers felt grateful to be able to have space to share that, and then likewise we were grateful for their willingness to share.
Okay, well, I appreciate hearing that. I did have one curious question. We talked about these benchmark tests that are done 3 times a year. How much time does that require, per student and for the teacher in order to administer that?
So the time is typically developed at the building level. So the window's open for about a month, and then buildings set aside the particular week that they want to administer the assessments. And so the iReady diagnostic is typically the longer of the assessments that the K-8 scope is participating in. And the FastBridge assessments are a little quicker because they're adaptive, although the time can vary based on the student, because it's not, outside of automaticity, it's not a time test. So students can go through it at the pace that's best suited for their skill level.
Okay. All right, thank you. So if there's nothing else, I just want to close again by thanking you for this presentation. I appreciate the follow-up. Certainly, as things look like they're on a good trajectory. Mr. Jankowski's questions on the timing when we're going to see the impact. I agree. It's probably going to take some time before you really see these things come along. But I'm hoping that with like the benchmark testing and some other shorter-term things, we can still see that things are improving. If there is nothing else, again, thank you for our speakers, and I guess we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay. Next item on the agenda is another installment in our 23-24 budget presentations, this one on budget priorities. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce? Or actually, you're going to present?
Yes, I am going to get us started this evening. You can see that we're like inching along. We're about 2/3 of the way through our budget process. Tonight, we are excited to share with you the second piece of our priorities for our budget for the 23-24 school year. As a quick reminder, at our last meeting in March, we provided an overview of the request, or hopefully set the context for the need for 7 interventionist positions at the elementary level. And tonight, we're going to talk through the remainder of the positions, which are actually all staffing positions at this point. So they do total approximately $1,750,000, and I will say this again at the end of the presentation to wrap up, but all of these positions at this point have been included in the draft of the 23-24 budget that you've seen earlier in the year. That is inclusive of that tax increase, again, which when the board saw it earlier in the year was at approximately 3.9%. And so to start us off this evening, I am going to invite Dr. Pekarik, our Director of Special Ed, who will share with us some background in terms of the elementary inclusion plan, as well as the need for additional staffing to support inclusion models at the elementary level, as well as looking at some staffing needs specifically in the area of special ed at the secondary level as well. Good evening. So to start us off, I'm going to begin with the elementary learning support and a historical perspective of our why. So in 2018-19, we recognized that we needed more inclusive practices, specifically at the elementary level. We had 67% of our students pulled out for ELA and math. 33% of our students were educated in the regular ed environment. The state target for inclusion for 80% or more of the time is 65%. So we were way off the mark. It was almost reverse numbers. Students who were educated in the learning support classrooms had a replacement curriculum, so they did not have access to the general education environment curriculum. And so in the learning support environment, there were small groups, but those groups were larger than some of the groups that were in the regular ed environment. So we knew we had to do something to change. So the vision was shared with the board as a component of our special ed plan. So this should look familiar to you. And from a historical perspective, again, we had inclusion committees at the elementary, middle, and high school level. And we developed our vision statement as an initial action step. So this has been in place since 2018-19. So as I articulated, in 18-19, we had only 33% of students included in regular education. As of the 22-23 school year, so as of this school year, we now have 81% of the students included in the general ed environment for 80% or more of the day. So we were able to make some changes. So over the past 4 years, we increased our percentage in regular ed by 48%. And we were able to do this through the support of the board. So as you can see, in 2020-21, we were able to add 1 position. And then in 22-23, we added 4 positions. So that truly made a difference. And listed on this slide are some of the responsibilities of the learning support teachers with regard to instruction. And Dr. Popolitis is going to talk to this slide.
Good evening. Just quickly want to share some of the data up here. If you kind of take a look at this, I'll walk you through it. There's a lot on the screen. So if you start with the title, or the subtitle, I should say, PVAS, it's Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. PVAS, as was brought up earlier this evening, and of course, earlier this year, you heard had a data presentation specific to PSSAs, PVAS, and other assessments that we use. PVAS is specific to growth on standardized assessments. So it takes a standardized assessment that's given 1 year, and then what's the growth from the next year that same standardized test or a different standardized test is given. So, for example, PSSA to PSSA or PSSA to Keystone exam. With PVAS assessment, you're truly looking at what is the growth, as I indicated before, from 1 year to the next. Green is kind of where you want to be. Green, down in the bottom left area, essentially is saying a student makes 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. It's great if you're in the blue area. That's more than a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time. So I said where you want to be in green. In a perfect world, you'd love to be in blue. Yellow and red is not where we want to be. Essentially, those students, for whatever reason, are not making the growth that we want them to make. There's been a lot of discussions this evening about proficiency, math in particular, growing students, and so when we talk about elementary and we look at this data up here, these are groups of students that were in a co-taught classroom that and the co-taught teachers this school year, 21-22 school year, were getting specific coaching and professional development on co-teaching. And co-teaching is the model that has the most support for special education students. And so those students are targeted to have the most needs based on the content level they have co-teaching, because there's two teachers in the classroom that are co-planning together and working collaboratively and together to make sure they're providing students with the appropriate instruction. There's several different models within co-teaching that these teachers are learning to use. So if you look at the data specifically, if we look at Shoemaker, again, in Shoemaker 5th grade in 21-22, they had the appropriate professional development and were co-teaching as a team. As you know, the year prior to this, even though we had our inclusion plan in place, the co-teaching really looked much different because of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic. So we had a break in kind of our work from 18-19 to this time, 21-22. But we really were able to pick up from where we left off in 18-19 with our vision and support students appropriately. So going back to Shoemaker 5th grade, the IEP group, they met the growth standard of 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. And we compared that to all students to see what's happening. Please keep in mind your IEP students, oftentimes in the co-teaching area, have sometimes the most significant needs in that area, that content area, and where they're getting co-teaching. And this is, as I indicated before, you're looking at a standardized assessment. Standardized assessments are assessing on grade level standards. And so oftentimes the students that you're looking at here, they're being assessed on grade level standards, even though they may be significantly below grade level standards. And so it's maybe not the best indicator. They also have IEP goals that they're looking at and progress monitoring that's specifically targeting and looking at the specific growth of individual students. What we've done here is take a look at the group of students that were getting co-teaching in these specific subject areas and grade levels, and then compare that to the overall students. Keeping in mind that some of these IEP students already struggle to learn, and that's why they're there. So looking at 5th grade math, met the growth standard for the IEP group, and the overall students had similar growth. So this is all students, including those without disabilities. At West Coastville, there was some concern in 4th grade math. There was concern for the all student group there as well as far as growth. In 5th grade, the IEP group met the growth standard, which was better than the overall group. In the 5th grade co-taught group at West Coastville. At Macungie, In fourth grade ELA, you see that the IEP students in English Language Arts met the growth standard. The all students exceeded that. They met the growth standard in math. The overall group exceeded that. And in fifth grade math, they were well above, the IEP group was well above the growth standard and well above above the overall students. And then in Willow Lane, both in math, both in fourth and fifth grade math, the IEP group exceeded the all-student group. So from this and from the discussions earlier this evening, there's a lot of work to be done, but we were happy with the students and the co-taught supports here to get a sense of where we are, how the growth that students are making, and then continuing that work to focus on these students and the training for the teachers to make sure the appropriate growth continues to get them toward more growth, gets them closer to that proficiency level, which is the ultimate goal.
Okay, so for elementary learning support, this slide really looks at the instructional models at the elementary level. And so by adding a teacher at Albertus, we will be able to add co-teaching in grades 3 math and grades 4 and 5 ELA. And we'll be able to add co-teaching at Jefferson if we add a teacher in grade 4 in math and grade 5 in ELA. So the instructional models for this year are really based on the staffing that we have as well as the schedules. And so for the 23-24 school year, we are evaluating the elementary schedules and we're looking at how we can maximize staff to continue to include more students in the regular education environment. The next slide relates to autistic support. So currently we have 3 autistic support teachers at the high school. 3 students are aging out at the end of the 22-23 school year, and that means that they'll turn 21 and they're no longer eligible for services. We have 6 students transitioning from the middle level, so from 8th to 9th for the 23-24 school year. So an additional teacher will be necessary to support the 6 additional students in order to maintain compliance with the maximum caseload of 8 students as outlined in Chapter 14. So the student projections are through the 25-26 school year, and as you can see, the need for that additional teacher that we're asking for will continue until that school year. So the caseloads will remain high. The next slide is for high school emotional support. So currently we have 3 teachers at the high school. 1 teacher is an ESSER position. So we have 8 students that will graduate this year at the end of the year, and we have 8 students that are going to transition from 8th to 9th grade. So our numbers will remain stable. We do have some students in the evaluation process as well. So we'll start with the caseloads at the high school at 62 students. We do have 12 students that need full-time emotional support. And so we need that teacher. The maximum for full-time is 12 students. And so that's absolutely necessary. As you see at the bottom, we have 21 students that are outplaced and in need of out-of-district emotional support placement. And so we're really trying to reduce those out-of-district placements and, support students within this environment. High school learning support. So currently we have 16 teachers at the high school. We are asking for 2 more teachers. The caseloads at the high school are very high. So you can see this year the average is 29. And so we're looking to reduce the caseloads. Number 1, it won't reduce by much. However, we need additional teachers to support our inclusive practices at the high school.
So in addition to professional staff or contracted teaching positions, we are also seeking a support staff position. And the first support staff position that we ask your support on is for an academic support assistant, specifically for Emmaus High School, specifically for our EL program, or that program that supports our English language learners. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview in terms of that program, and we're going to talk about caseload really to set the context or the setting for the need. So our English language learners, as a reminder, district-wide are those students who are either not native English speakers or they reside in a household in which a language other than English is spoken. Our students fall on a continuum of English language skills, ranging from those who are non-English speaking to those who are proficient in English but qualify for English language supports, specifically because they might need some support with their academic coursework based on the language deficiency. At Emmaus High School, we currently have 32 EL students at the high school, and 11 of those students are non-English speaking. As a point of comparison, last year at Emmaus High School, we had 4 students who were non-English speaking. And so in terms of level of need of our English language students, I think it's accurate to characterize it as we are seeing students who have a more significant level of support in terms of their language acquisition. The other piece that I wanted to share with you, again, although the request really is for an academic support assistant specific to the high school, to those 32 students, I wanted to also give the board a sense of our program, our English language learner program district-wide. You can see the historical perspective there. Again, this year, for 22-23, we have certainly seen what we would describe as a significant increase in terms of newly enrolled EL students, 73 this year, which puts our total enrollment at 152 students. As a frame of reference, specific to Emmaus High School, we have those 32 students, 11 of whom are non-English speaking. We have one English language teacher who was at the high school full-time. We have another English language teacher who, for a limited amount of time, is able to come over to the high school to provide support. And really, the academic support assistant is intended so that we can more appropriately support the needs of our English language students, particularly when they're being included in their core content areas. And so I just ask you for a moment to think about the fact that we would have 32 students at the high school, all of whom have a level of need and support specific to language acquisition. And if you think about the breadth of classes that we offer at Emmaus High School, they really are spread out in terms of taking a variety of courses at the high school. And this really does become a matter of needing the personnel to appropriately support those students in their classes. The other support staff position is an instructional assistant, and this position would be shared among our VESPA students as well as our high school students in the transition program. And I always appreciate when the board asks questions about perhaps the inefficiencies of sharing positions, and I will say that this is a position that we actually feel, based on the uniquenesses of these two programs, that we really could appropriately share a support staff position that would work with students in both our high school VESPA program as well as the high school transition program. Specifically, the instructional assistant does just that, supports the instruction, supports the work of the student in terms of their academic work as well as executive functioning. So when we're thinking about things such as time management, self-management, planning, organization, again, providing support to students who are in that VESPA program or in our transition program. again, to give you a little sense of the number of students that we're talking, currently at our secondary VESPA program, grades 6 through 12, we have 180 students who are enrolled in that program. 31% of them have either an IEP or a 504. So I mentioned that in terms of they have specifically designed instruction to which they are entitled, and we need to be providing those additional supports. The instructional assistant would be working closely with students who have that demonstrated need. The instructional assistant might be supporting those students in our VESPA program who might come here to our VESPA room for in-person support. The instructional assistant might also be supporting VESPA students who make the choice and are successful in terms of doing the bulk of their work asynchronously or online as well. In terms of the instructional assistant supporting students in our high school transition program, as you know, this is the first year in which we have a transition program that's at all 3 of our secondary buildings, 1 in each middle school, 1 at the high school. This is a program that we have designed specifically to serve our students who have a personal or an external challenge that may be impacting their ability to be successful academically at school. And so this is designed to be a small group setting, very supportive, therapeutic supports in place, and we're focusing both on academics as well as addressing those behavioral, additional emotional needs that need to be attuned, that need attention first so that they can be successful academically. On average, in the high school this year, again, the ask is specific for a support staff position to spend part of his or her time in the high school. On average, we've had about 14 students who are in the transition program at any given time. And again, the amount of time that students might spend in the transition room varies based on the specific needs of the student. So although we have 4 blocks, there's 4 instructional blocks at the high school, our transition students might not spend the entire time in the transition room. They might be out in some of their core classes and then always have that transition setting to come back to. So this really becomes, because we have students with almost an individualized program, the need for the additional support, the additional staffing support to support them when they're out in their classrooms, as well as that consistency when they're coming back to the transition program. And then the final request, or I should say the final priority that our team has identified, and back on the initial slide, we have a dollar amount of approximately $200,000 specifically for safety and security. And at this point, we envision that we would allocate those funds to support resources, specifically personnel, whose primary responsibility would be to enhance safety and security at our middle level program. And so again, all of the budget positions, I should say all of the priority positions that we've talked about over the past month, which include interventionist positions, special education positions at both the elementary and high school level, the support staff positions to support our EL as well as our students in our alternative ed programs, and finally the safety and security priorities total approximately $1,750,000. We do have those priorities already included into the draft budget that you saw. Our team is coming back at our next budget meeting, I believe. Mr. Saul's agreeing, yes, with some updated numbers for you. And this wraps up our priority process of the budget. And certainly our team is here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Dr. Whitney.
Just a quick question on the math in terms of the $50,000 for 2 support staff positions. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So that's the salary for those 2 positions.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Bowen.
I'm sorry, I have really poor handwriting. The 81% of I believe it was elementary school students that are included for 80% or more of the day. Just to clarify, that 80% is not necessarily all academic time.
Correct, correct.
Do you know approximately what portion of that time is academic?
I can get that for you. I would have to kind of flush out the time in like the specials, that they're in specials per day.
So I would consider specials to be of an academic nature. I'm asking, so is a portion of this time is lunch?
No,
no. It's all classroom time?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Do you know approximately what percentage of students are included for less than 80% of the day?
I don't have that, but I can get that to the board.
Do you know what percentage are not included at all?
Everyone is included.
For
to
some portion
to
of
some
the day?
extent, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Does this increase in special ed staffing at the elementary level mean that more students will be included in general ed, more time in general ed will be of an academic nature, or both?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The increase in special ed staffing at the elementary level, does that mean that more students will be included in general ed? That more time in general ed will be of an academic nature, or both?
It'll be academic in nature, so we're adding teachers to support those particular co-teaching in those subjects.
Do you think that will allow for a greater number of students to be included in
Yes.
academic classes?
Yes.
The additional teachers at the high school level, does that also allow for greater inclusion, or is it just to stay within caseload parameters?
So no, it's not just for caseloads, it's also for inclusionary practices to support students.
Okay, and I recognize I won't always be sitting here, so I might just take my moment here and ask a question that I don't think you'll be able to answer. What would it take to budget enough faculty and staff to ensure that every student in the district is included for a reasonable percentage of the day?
So I can tell you that when we had our inclusion plan for our 5-year plan, for next school year, we were going to ask for 4 teachers. Because of the competing things that we need, we dropped that down to 2. So it really should have been 4. But we sharpened our pencil before you asked me to.
Okay. Do you foresee in the future, just in case there's not a board member here who will ask this question, do you foresee in the future, is the vision of the district to have enough faculty and staff to accommodate inclusion at all levels, in all buildings, and for all student populations?
I would hope so, moving forward, that our vision for inclusionary practices is implemented.
And I appreciate the questions, and I just have I'm going to say maybe a more general response to that as well. In addition to the staff really at any level, we're also, but particularly at the elementary level, we're also looking at elementary schedules. And is there a way, and it really is a question, like we're in the process of developing schedules for next year. Is there a way to be more efficient in scheduling so that potentially we can achieve our vision for inclusive practices, primarily in ELA and math, with these 2 additional teachers, like Dr. Carrick had talked about? Originally there was a multi-year vision for how much staff we would need. So we're looking at that granular level as well for next year. And I think as well, like to take us back a couple months when we talked about inclusion, as a reminder, co-teaching, and you heard Dr. Povolitis refer to this. Co-teaching is one model of inclusion in which there's a special ed and a regular ed teacher assigned to a particular content area for the entire period of time. We also know from the research that there are other instructional models to help us meet the needs of all learners, including our special ed students. And so it's also about being sure that we're using the co-teaching model in the most appropriate way. And again, I don't say those statements in terms of making a conclusion about it, but it's just continued work for us to do.
I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bowen. Additional questions? Ms. Bowman?
I have a very, you named a new position for me that I hadn't heard before. Academic support assistant, what's the training and like, can you just tell me a little bit more about what that is?
And I'm sorry that I added new position and terminology to further. That was not at all my intention. Academic support assistants are individuals who, we have individuals, some of whom are funded through our Title I, others of whom are funded through district monies. Those are support staff positions who work with regular education students. When we talk about our instructional assistants, we're also referring to very valuable support staff positions who work with our students who qualify for special education. Hence, academic support works with regular ed.
Okay.
Instructional assistants work with special ed.
Okay, so it's a
Both
similar job, though.
support staff positions that take direction or guidance from our classroom teachers and help support students.
Okay, are the academic support assistants one-on-ones or are they like one on small group?
Small group.
Okay, thank you. And I think Mrs. Bowen's question was sort of partially answered, or she asked, what would it take to have full inclusion? And you said you wanted to hire 4 teachers and instead we're hiring 2. Does that mean if we had hired 4, we would have full inclusion?
Probably not, because if you look at the one slide, Lincoln Elementary School is still the school that kind of has a deficit. And so we're really looking at the schedules there and the staff that we have to improve the inclusionary practices there without adding staff.
Okay, that's your answer for next year, but are you looking longer term and in terms of there will be needs in the future that will help us to achieve this goal? Is this like one small step in that direction, or is it the only step? I guess that's my question.
So, I mean, it is a step in, I guess, the vision that we had in our 5-year plan. You know, it needs to be tweaked every year because, you know, as we're looking at revamping schedules and looking at how we're utilizing staff, we don't know what impact that will have yet. And so that may have an impact that, yes, everyone can be included for grades 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Champagne.
Yes, thank you. This question kind of goes back to last week and a little bit about what we talked about with respect to math. And I'm sorry if I don't recall all this, but could we go through and how many interventionists do we have at each level for math and for reading, including the ones that are in the priority list? What will be the total head count now for interventionists across the district?
Wait, can you repeat the question? How many interventionists are?
For math and reading, will we have district-wide at each level? With the inclusion, if we go through with the priorities that you've identified.
Okay, and I'm going to call on my team to help me. We would have, did you say 100? No. We would have 7 elementary interventionists, contracted position, whose primary focus would be reading, As we mentioned in the last meeting, not to complicate things, that would be the primary focus. There are some buildings in which we're also able to address some math interventions as well. Currently, and we envision continuing supporting these positions next year, we have 2 academic support assistants, and 2 math interventionists. We have 2 math interventionists that are supported by ESSER dollars
At the elementary level.
at the elementary level. And then our secondary. Secondary level, we have 3 reading, 3 math. Those 6 positions are supported by ESSER. Thank you.
1 reading contract at the high school and 1 reading ESSER.
And then at the high school,
Yep. Go ahead.
2 positions, 1 contracted. It's a reading interventionist. And 1 ESSER position reading at the high school.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you again for another informative installment. We look forward to hearing more in 2 weeks for the budget update. Again, certainly defining a case for need, but again, we'll continue to talk when we convene again in next month. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next item on the agenda is personnel. We're going to take these items separately. First item is the personnel agenda. May I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Chinkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Allen. Dr. Campbell, I think you wanted to say some words.
I do. I think I've shared with you before that the springtime, in terms of when we see retirements on the agenda, can be a real bittersweet time, just in terms of, we're certainly appreciative of individuals who've devoted their career to East Penn and to our students, and wish them well in their retirement, and are excited for their next stage in their personal adventures. At the same time, we're sad to see them leave. And so tonight, the board has accepted the retirement of 6 individuals who collectively have 148 years of combined service in East Penn. And so again, Susie Friedman has 16 years in East Penn. She's been a primary teacher at Jefferson Elementary. John Gallagher has 30 years of service in East Penn. He has been really a staple in our social studies department at the high school, and really a bedrock of the department. Tim Hurd, 30 years of experience in East Penn, all of which have been at Shoemaker Elementary. He actually is he and I used to teach on the same team, and so certainly have many great fond memories of working with Tim. Claudia Murray has 21 years of service as a world language teacher, specifically in the area of Spanish at Emmaus High School. And Pam Briety has 17 years of experience in East Penn. She was a first grade teacher and then was one of our pioneers in our full-day kindergarten program at Albertus Elementary. And finally, Lillian Wonderly has 34 years of dedicated service in East Penn, and she's been an English teacher at Lower Macungie Middle School for all of those years. So again, we certainly congratulate and wish our retirees well as they think about life after East Penn.
Okay.
In addition, if I could go on, we're also very excited to have 2 administrative appointments that were approved tonight. Specifically, the board approved Mrs. Jody Freed as our Director of Special Education. Dr. Pekarik, as you know, is retiring. I commented to her that this was probably one of her last budget presentations. And so Dr. Pekarik will retire at the end of this school year, and we are really fortunate to have Jody Freed, who currently serves as our Supervisor of Special Education at the middle level. So she's been in East Penn for several years. Again, feel very fortunate that she wishes to continue her leadership journey by taking over the director position. In addition to her experience in East Penn, Jody has a breadth of leadership experiences in other school districts, a total of 22 years of experience in education. And so please join me in congratulating Jody. And I do invite her to come up and just hear the congratulations from each of our board members, as we typically do with new administrative appointments. So come on up, Jody.
Congratulations. Forward to you. Success.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you.
All right, and we can take a... And we also are very excited to have Mrs. Becca Champion, who will be joining our administrative team as the new principal of Lincoln Elementary. For Becca, when I offered her the position, she said it's like going back home, because she actually started her career in East Penn as an elementary teacher at Lincoln. And then she moved on to a quasi-leadership experience serving as an instructional specialist at Willow Lane Elementary for the past several years. And again, she'll now be returning as the principal at Lincoln Elementary, which I've shared with her as well, was one of my first principal positions. And so Lincoln has a really special place in my heart, and we're thrilled to have her filling that leadership position at Lincoln. So please join me in congratulating Becca, and she also is here tonight and will come up to meet each of you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item B, the EPA Memorandum of Agreement. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any questions, comments from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next item on the agenda is business operations. If there's no objections, I'd like to take items A through E together. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Dr. Whitney?
I'd just like to ask the contract about the new student attendance system. I was just wondering if you could take a minute to kind of explain to the public how that system will work and what we anticipate its benefits will be.
Yes, this is the system that I think our director of technology shared what it does, and I didn't even allow him to finish it. And I said, yes, that sounds exactly like something that we would need. But high-level overview, this is the attendance tracker one. So it would allow for really simple and timely communication when a student is not present in school and is expected to be there. I think that's maybe the Mr. Billman, do you have anything else to add?
Just really briefly, it allows parents to be able to report their absences through an 800 number, a web portal, and an app, as well as allows them to report absences in advance. So they'll be able to report absences, and that system we have as part of our system with School Messenger, and it works with CFR works with PowerSchool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Ms. Bowman?
Just a comment that I am really happy we're getting that finally, especially a high school level with all the lost slips that get kids into trouble just for paperwork issues. So that's awesome.
Yes, I have them in my car.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm always rooting for that. Yes. Yes.
Any additional comments? I guess before we take a vote, I would like to recognize the donation under item D, $10,000 from Lehigh Valley Educators Credit Union for the purchase of calculators for EPSD students. So I'd like to express our gratitude for that. Okay. All right, Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Falegi,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen,
Aye.
Miss Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Mr. Champagne,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next item on the agenda is curriculum. May I have a motion for educational conferences?
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen,
Aye.
Miss Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Mr. Champagne,
Aye.
Mr. Falegi,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. The next item on the agenda is policy, second reading for a set of policies and update, I'm sorry, for the set of policies. Dr. Povolitis, is there anything you'd like to report?
Just a few minor adjustments to policy 808 attachment.
Okay. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board on the policies? Okay, they'll move on to third reading at our next meeting. Thank you. Okay, next item is other educational entities. A report from Dr. Whitney from CLIU.
Sure, thank you. CLIU Board of Directors met on April 17th. The agenda included a couple of presentations about programs in the IU, one being the deaf and hard of hearing programs. Those programs are hosted at the Parkland School District facilities. But looking at the numbers, they sort of showed the numbers for students from each district that participate in these programs. And East Penn has the second highest number of students that take advantage of the programs, which include everything from audiology services to diagnose hearing difficulties, to interpreters, to teaching sign language of various different kinds, so to sort of meet the students where they are. We had a great presentation from a student who has been through these programs and taken advantage of these programs, and he talked glowingly about how much it helped him feel confident in himself. And he's actually, I think, the president of the Spirit Club at his high school, so he's really been a successful student, and he really attributed that to the support that he got from the IU's hard of hearing program. So that was a really inspiring presentation. The other presentation was from the transportation department, which, as you can imagine, the IU has an incredibly robust transportation department, necessarily so. We had some really staggering figures. They have a 735 square mile area that needs to be covered among the 14 school districts, and something like 2.5 million miles traveled every year in their various transportation fleets. So a fleet of 170 vehicles, and actually one of the items on the agenda was starting to, or I guess resuming, a fleet modernization plan that had already been approved by the board pre-COVID and was sort of put on hold during COVID, but now is, as a lot of their fleet is aging out, and there's a lot of options available for updating and modernizing the fleet of buses that they have. We approved 15 vehicles to go to salvage that had passed their usage, and we approved the purchase of 20 new minibuses with wheelchair lifts that will help the fleet be a little more efficient and effective. And fortunately, the funding for those 20 buses is going to come from the Pennsylvania School-Based Access Program. Because of what the expenses are, they qualify for that funding, so there's no additional cost to the school district for that purchase of 20 new minibuses. Supply chains being what they are, those buses won't be in the fleet for about another year and a half, but they have been approved and they will be purchased. Then just a couple of other quick items. We approved a renewed contract for services, legal services with Sweet Stevens, Katz, and Williams. Provide solicitor services to the IU, renewed that contract for another year, and approved a new electronic data storage policy, which is was written to comply with various laws and practices around the use of personal data storage. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitney, for that report. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, thank you again. Item B, under other educational entities, is to approve the 23-24 CLIU Special Education Facilities Plan. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Jankowski.
Ask Dr. Whitney your thoughts on what we're asked to approve tonight.
Yeah, no, I think it's very straightforward. It's a fairly simple plan. Again, it was reviewed by all the district contacts and approved by them as well as by the board. Really the highlight here is something that our district, that won't affect our district, but our friends in Carbon County, the vocational transition program up there. There's 2 such programs already in place in Lehigh County, but this will be new for Carbon County, and these are tremendously successful programs in helping high school age students get experience in the world of work and take them into transitional careers. But that's, so that's probably the most cost-intensive thing on this list. Everything else is pretty much items that were approved previously that had been on hold for various reasons, mostly pandemic related. So there's nothing in here that's going to substantially impact bottom line as far as district contributions go. So I recommend approval.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitney, and thank you for the question. Anything else? Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you. There are no other items. There are 2 announcements. First announcement is that we held an executive session this evening where we discussed safety and security, personnel, and confidential matters. Our next regular board meeting is going to be in 2 weeks on Monday, May 8th at 7:30 in the boardroom. With no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.